Welcome to This Week in Virginia, and it's my delight and pleasure to welcome John Rocovich as our very special guest. Anyone in Southwest Virginia and throughout Virginia knows John Rocovich. They know that he's a native of Roanoke, Virginia Tech graduate, and is everything Mr. Virginia Tech too. But he did more than Virginia Tech. He went to University of Richmond Law School and went to NYU for a Master in Law and Taxation. Started his own law firm in Richmond, Moss and Rocovich. And gosh, John, I realize you're admitted to the bar in Virginia, the District of Columbia, the U.S. Supreme Court, and then so many federal claims and courts of appeals. You could be anywhere, but we thank you for being on This Week in Virginia, and really to talk to us about something that you started about 20 years ago. I'm sure it was in your mind before then, but when you started the Edward Via College of Osteopathic Medicine in Blacksburg, and you're chairman of the board of directors, and really want to have you tell our viewers about VCOM. And let's start by saying what really led you to take such bold action in launching an osteopathic medical school in Virginia?
Well, my wife was really the wind beneath my wings. She had a PhD in genetics, had gone to a osteopathic medical school, did a residency at the University of Virginia program. And we both noticed that all of the physicians who had come over to America on the J-1 visa program between 1968 and 2001 were dying off, and nobody was replacing them. You might recall that program after Medicare came in, said if you're a doctor anywhere in the world, you can come to the U.S., get a green card, take 2 years of postgraduate training, and then work in an underserved area for 5 years. You were a citizen. Well, 147,000 of those people came in from around the world, and we noticed that they were dying off and nobody was replacing them. And you might say first we took the liberal approach to the problem and we said, this is a real problem. Somebody ought to do something about this. Right. Then we took the conservative approach and said, well, this is a real problem. Maybe we ought to do something about it. So we decided that we could start a medical school in Virginia to meet the unmet need in underserved Virginia, the rural and underserved part. So we did that. And I'd had a fair amount of experience representing physicians and a wide variety of people in the healthcare industry. And Sue Ellen certainly had been experienced. She had been practicing medicine for about 20 years. And so I had a foundation that was doing neuromuscular disease research, largely Parkinson's disease, that had been working on transportation drug. And the chief scientist had gotten old and wanted to retire. And so we metamorphosed that into the medical college. So we got that up and running, and we're very happy with the way that was going. And the dean of that school noticed that the situation for underserved was far worse in North South Carolina. So we then looked around and fell in love with Spartanburg, built a school there. While we were there, we got approached by the president of Auburn saying that would we consider coming down there and building one on his campus. And we fell in love with Auburn and did that. And then later on, we went to Monroe, Louisiana, where the need was overwhelming, and built one on the campus of UL Monroe. So it's one medical college with 4 branches.
John, I think all the information I've seen that you really had in your heart, you and your wife, and your interest in serving in the underserved areas and thinking that osteopathic physicians would be serving there. Has that proven to be successful, that effort to try to get care into the areas where there's great need?
Yes, it has. The reason we selected osteopathic medicine was that most of the osteopathic physicians tend to become primary care doctors. The only other form of medical practice in America is allopathic physician, which is an MD. Luckily, Sue Ellen had been to an osteopathic medical school and did an MD residency, and I had fair familiarity with how things work. And it has worked out. For example, when we opened in Blacksburg, Virginia, I believe, was like 38th in primary care providers per capita. After we opened and started producing physicians in Virginia, we got them up to 8. So we have made a difference. Our goal, of course, would be to be first, so that Virginia was first among the states in primary care providers per capita. We'd like to be first. Our goal is the Appalachian region, Southeast, and Delta region to meet the unmet need for physicians in an underserved area. And the primary need in underserved areas is for primary care physicians. About 2/3 of our graduates are primary care doctors, and about 2/3 of our graduates stay in the Appalachian, Southeast, and Delta region. So it has worked out well, and we are meeting a very important need.
You know, one of the other things I learned in doing just a little bit of research about VCOM is the diversity of the students. Say something about that, and how does that compare with other medical schools?
Well, there are a couple of hundred medical schools, both MD and DO medical schools. MDs comprise about 75% of the profession, and DOs are about 25% roughly right now. VCOM matriculates more African-American students than any other of the integrated medical schools, of which there are about 200. We do that because we think it's important. I think we're number 2 in Hispanic students. I believe UCLA is still ahead of us there, although hopefully we'll catch them also. It's very important that you have that your medical school class looks just like America. And that is, you know, I remember a song we sang when I was growing up, Baptist Sunday School, red, yellow, black, and white, they're all precious in his sight. Jesus loves the little children of the world. Well, if we're going to meet the unmet needs in the Southeast, we have to have a diverse class that represents every group. And so we work hard to recruit a diverse class, and we've been successful at that. And it's worked out. And that's the only way you're going to be effective. I couldn't take somebody from New York City and expect them to practice medicine in central Alabama.
Now, when you think about the cost of medical school, I mean, I remember hearing, even in my youth, and particularly in my older years, about how expensive it is, how much debt that someone accumulates during the time. Is that true with students at VCOM? Because I would think it would be difficult to serve in those underserved areas, incomes probably being down, if you left with a tremendous amount of debt, the tuition was high. What's your model, and how does that work?
Well, the template that we work on is we try very hard to stay at the low end of the tuition scale. I think we're either 4th or 5th from the bottom as far as tuition goes among private medical schools in America. We work hard, and we have the latest, greatest of everything: the finest buildings, the finest anatomy labs, the finest micro labs, the finest multimedia teaching equipment. But our model is to try to keep the cost as low as possible. However, even at that, the tuition is going to be in the $40-some thousand a year, and your students are probably going to leave with a couple of $100,000 or so of debt, which they have to pay off. Now, luckily, the direct federal loan program lets you pay it off over a long period of time at very reasonable payments, so that our students can, in fact, settle in underserved areas and like rural Appalachia, the Delta region, and the Black Belt of Alabama, for example, and they're able to pay off their student loans. We work really hard to keep it low. Some of the medical schools are double or more what we are. So we're a charity. We're a 501c3 organization, a nonprofit. So we're very mission driven. I say to the students on day one at every campus, we're mission driven. The mission of VCOM is we're here to save the world, and that needs to be your mission.
Now, how does it work being private? You say nonprofit because, again, I'm not all that aware of what's happening all throughout the country, but thinking about other medical schools in the Commonwealth and the work they do, and my working around the state capitol and looking at times at the state budget, it seems like that there's quite a bit of taxpayer money that goes into those schools to try to help keep the costs down and everything. I would think it'd be a real challenge to have one that's private, not getting that kind of government direct government money.
And that's why we've worked really hard to have a template that works. We run the school like a business. We can't afford to run it like an 11-layered bureaucracy, like Virginia Tech, UVA, like the other state schools. What you'll find if you do the research is that the average medical school in America loses between $100,000 and $150,000 per student per year forever, a hole that's cheerfully and unknowingly plugged by either the taxpayers or a large endowment. Being a startup and being a private school, we don't have any of those resources. We don't get state money, and we didn't start out with a large endowment. So we have to run a tight ship, and we have to run it like a business instead of a 10 or 11 layered education and bureaucracy where you have backups to backups to backups and layer after layer after layer of duplication. So we have a template that works, and we run it in a business-like way in order to keep the costs under control.
You know, I would imagine you have a large pool of applicants to choose from. Again, I've heard about medical schools in general that many of the students admitted the first year don't make it the second year. What's been your experience at VCOM, and what do you do there?
Well, you're right about that. Attrition, the national attrition rate for medical schools is about 8%. Our historic rate is about 3.9. Our goal is to never lose anybody if we can help it. We try to have the best retention possible. Unfortunately, life happens to people. We've lost, I've had attrition due to lung cancer, breast cancer, pancreatic cancer. We even car wrecks. We even had a person die from anaphylactic shock from a bee sting. If you can imagine that as a way to depart this life. Very fine student, I might add. And so our goal is to have very low attrition, a very high board pass rate, and 100% residency placement rate. And we work really hard at that. And so far, we've been successful.
Yeah, pick up on that last part about the board pass rate. So how's VCOM stack up against state schools and other private schools?
Well, our goal, we are above average on the first time board pass rate. We come pretty close to 100% for a subsequent take. One of the ways you're evaluated is how well you do on your first time board pass rate. We're above average, but our goal is not to be to get so good that we never have anybody that misses on the first try. Our goal is to put primary care doctors into the Southeast, and we will stick with you as long as, we'll stick with you through time after time until we get you through it. If we have to retrain you and retest you and retry you, our goal is to be successful at turning out as many physicians as possible to impact the region. In a war, you can't win a war like this with a rifle platoon. It takes an army to do that because remember, physicians' careers are fairly short, and life happens to physicians the same as everybody else. And so most of them are well into their 30s before they actually start. If you're lucky, you can get in about a 30-year career because of all the usual strokes, heart attacks, palsy, whatever happens to people happens to physicians, maybe worse than other people because they're more exposed to a lot of things. So our goal is to be successful at that. And so far, everything's worked out well. We've had an above average board pass rate and very low attrition and virtually 100% placement rate in residency training. Every year, there are thousands of medical students that don't get a residency. I don't believe we've ever had a student that was not offered a residency. Every once in a while, they'll turn them down, but so far, I believe we've had virtually every student that we got through was offered a residency, and we hope we can keep that up.
So their residencies might be in Virginia. It could be I guess it could be anywhere because it's probably hard to place all of them right here in the Commonwealth.
Well, we try to place them where they want to be. Now, keep in mind, we've got 4 schools. But
Right.
yes, in fact, sometimes you'll have a situation where a person stumbles on boards several times, and then you've got a limited number of states that will accept a person into residency who struggled with boards. But we are able to get them placed. And first you have the match with the computer thing, and following that you have the scramble, and without going into a lot of detail. So far, we've been successful. We've got 40 some hundred, I don't know what the exact count is, well over 4,000 physicians that have graduated from VCOM. In the last, well, we started in 01, our first class was 07. So I guess we've graduated 14 or 15 classes from Blacksburg, and then maybe a half a dozen or 8 from South Carolina, and 3 or 4 from Auburn. And we're a couple of years away from graduating the first class at University of Louisiana Monroe.
It may be something that you're only speculating on, or you may not have a real clear answer right now, but where's the 5th school going to be?
Well, because the way accreditation works, we can't even think about any kind of additional schools until after we graduate a class in Monroe. And so we just wait and see what the needs are and what the opportunities are. We don't have any plans along that line. As you know, one of our goals is to expand into allied healthcare. So we've been working on that a lot lately, but we can't even think about that for about 2.5 years. So we're concentrating on what's in front of us right now.
I'm glad you mentioned the allied healthcare, because you know very well from all of your experience, your wife's experience, that it's not just doctors that are needed, particularly in underserved areas. So what is VCOM doing in that area?
Well, we've been very fortunate because during this year, we had a couple of other enterprises that joined the VCOM family. The Appalachian College of Pharmacy, which produces PharmDs, that's doctor of pharmacy degrees. It's located in Buchanan County. It joined the VCOM family. So now we can offer students a pharmacy doctorate. And also Bluefield University has joined the VCOM family, and they have RN to BSN nursing, Master of Nursing. They've got an MBA with a healthcare track. They have psychology. They have some very good certificate programs. And so, and we also have we have a master's degree program, Master of Arts in Biomedical Sciences. We do jointly with Bluefield. We have a master's degree in Applied Healthcare Data Analytics. We do jointly with another Baptist school, Averett University. But our goal is to broaden our offering in allied healthcare so that the physicians have more support. By the year 2035, depending on whose prediction you believe, we're going to be short between 100 and 130,000 physicians. So we're never going to really catch up on physicians. And remember, you not only have a shortage, you've got a maldistribution. If you live in Roanoke or Charlottesville or Beverly Hills or Reston or somewhere, you've got every specialty. You're loaded with great doctors. You have wonderful health care. If you live in Pineapple, Alabama, you probably don't have a doctor in your county. And that's a big difference. So you've got not only a shortage, you've got a maldistribution. And we worry about that too. And that's another problem we're trying to solve. But with this allied healthcare providers, people can be highly useful, deliver high quality healthcare, support the medical profession, and we can solve this healthcare crisis. I'll give you just one simple example. When we went to Alabama, Alabama led the nation in premature cardiac death. They led the nation in infant mortality. They were second or third from the last in obesity and diabetes. And they also, Black women in the Black Belt of Alabama were dying from cervical cancer at a rate 200% the national average. Well, there's a shot called Gardasil that's 100% effective against 80% of the causes of cervical cancer. But if you don't have a doctor in your county, you're not getting the shot. So, but if you have a primary care provider that can give you that shot, then you ought to be dying at a rate that's 20% the national average, not 200%. That's why it's so important to get primary care providers into counties where they haven't had a doctor. And, there's still communities that have no doctor. And our goal is to meet that need and to try to be sure that everybody has good health care. And as I say to the students, I hope you'll agree with me that every child deserves a healthy start in life. And that's our goal, is to populate these underserved areas so that hopefully every child can have a healthy start in life, and we can take care of the older folks too.
You know, I've noticed here at the Capitol over the years that there's been a relatively slow, but there has been some changes in the practice scope of some of the people in the allied health professions, whether it's nurse practitioners or whether it's even pharmacists and all, because I think there was a time, and you know it well, in which the doctors didn't want anyone getting into their area of practice. And in their major areas, no one should be in their areas. But there's other things that the allied health professionals can do, and I think that the doctors have certainly come around. The medical societies have not fought it the way that they did a couple of decades ago of expanding the access to care, because some communities, it may right now just be a nurse practitioner is the highest level of any trained medical person in that county.
Well, you've got to make a good point, and think about this example. Think about where you've gotten your shots in recent years. When I was growing up, all my shots were at the doctor's office. Now my shots are from the pharmacist. So you've seen an area where an allied healthcare provider has done a perfectly competent job with virtually no visible ill effects, and it's taken the load off the doctor, so the doctor can spend his time or her time doing more, using his skill set at a higher level. And on that very subject, one thing we've noticed particularly is not only does our class look like America, but we're seeing a continued rise in women going into medicine. Like the fall class we have in right now, the majority of the students are women. Women are continuing to increase the percentage of penetration into the medical field, and doing a great job too. When people ask me why that is, I say it's easy. Women are smarter and work harder. It's not hard to figure, and we're very happy about that.
You know, I've got to mention, when I got my Pfizer vaccination, I noticed that the person who had signed the form had a Norton, Virginia address, and I got the vaccination here in Richmond. And so I checked before I left the pharmacy, and I said, "Is that person here from Norton? I'd like to speak to her. We used to live in Norton at one time." And they said, "Oh no, she's over our practice, but she's not physically here all the time." But it worked out just fine to get the shots the way I did, and I'm glad that was relaxed, that somebody supervising didn't have to be the one right there on the location all the time. Well, John, before I would have too much of your time taken with all the enterprises that you're involved with, talk a little bit, if you would, about what's next for VCOM. You said you have to wait some time before you'd see if there'd be another school, may be or may not be. You've talked about the allied health professions. I think you're a visionary, and as you said, you start off as a liberal saying somebody ought to do it, but then you come around as a conservative and say maybe we should do it. I should do it. So what's next for VCOM, or if you'd like, what's next for John Rocovich?
Well, taking both of those, at each stage of your life, you've got to decide what you're going to do with it. And my wife and I decided to spend the last quarter of our life on VCOM. I think that's you accomplish a lot more than playing golf in Florida. So I've thoroughly enjoyed at this stage of my life being able to be involved in something as interesting and enjoyable as VCOM. And keep in mind, it takes a huge team effort. Every school has a dean. We have a provost and a president who was our founding dean, who's a gifted visionary, Dr. Dixie Rawlins, who's led this enterprise really from day one. There are literally thousands of faculty members that teach as preceptors and that teach in the classroom. So it's a huge effort. VCOM is the only medical school that runs full-time missionary medicine clinics. We have full-time clinics in Dominican Republic, Honduras, and El Salvador. And it's great training for our students to go down there and be able to treat those people. But it also is a great service we provide in those countries. We do mobile clinics up in those rural villages. We look after orphanages. We have a large pediatric operation too. It's good training for the students, but also when you're a medical missionary, it solidifies the reason you went to medical school. Psychological studies have long shown that people who serve other people are the happiest people in the world, and I believe medicine is the ultimate service career when you think about it. I think our goal in VCOM is to try to make the maximum impact on the Appalachian Southeast and Delta region that we can make in healthcare. And doing that, I haven't checked the numbers lately. We probably have the second largest class of any medical school in the country. I believe we're certified to take up to 670 students per class across the 4 locations. I think by developing a lot of these allied healthcare programs where you develop trained people who can work for and support the physicians, I believe we can make a massive impact in that. We're working on several programs that are in the process of heading through accreditation to train folks who'll work under physicians and help support them. And I believe certainly over the next 2.5 years, while we're waiting for Louisiana school to mature and graduate a class, that's where we can make the greatest impact on our culture. Again, I say it takes an army to get out there and make a difference, because the need is so great, particularly these rural and underserved areas. Like I say, if you live in Richmond or Reston or Charlottesville, you don't have any sense of what the need is and how far some people have to drive to see a physician. When you think about like premature cardiac death, just simply a physician who can help you with your diet and help you with a statin drug or something, you can add 20 years to somebody's life and dramatically improve the quality of their lives with pretty straightforward, simple healthcare. But if there's no doctor in your county, you're not getting that. And so, VCOM is also working to make a difference in research. Weekend after this one, we're having our annual research retreat with all our research faculty, with speakers and presentations and posters, where we try to figure out how we're going to move forward in research. It's research that creates the new solutions for these diseases and other problems. We want to make a real difference in research, but we have a strong mission outreach. I don't believe you're going to be a successful physician if you don't have a missionary's heart, David. I think that's required, and the students we recruit understand that. They understand VCOMs. We're here trying to save the world, and particularly the Southeast, and we want to make the maximum impact we can on our region and really make a difference. As I tell the students, that if you're a physician, you're going to live a life that really matters. You're literally going to change the trajectory of Western civilization with the thousands of patient encounters you're going to have. And so, VCOM marches to the beat of a different drummer. We've got that missionary medicine commitment. And, I always like to address on Accepted Students Day, we get more parents than we get students come to that. But the question is, why should you come to VCOM instead of going to one of the other 200 schools? And we hope that everybody who's accepted wants to come, but I go through that with them. I'll give you an example. As part of the tuition, we provide medical care and disability insurance. I don't know of any other medical school that does that. There may be one, but we found that we can, with the group rates and the like, that we can provide care for our students at a much lesser rate than they can provide it for themselves. So we do a lot of little things like that we think make a difference in people's lives. And our goal is to inculcate our culture into these students, so when they leave with that missionary medicine culture that we think is essential to being successful.
John Rocovich, I thank you so much, Chairman of the Board of VCOM. I reached out to couple of your board members that are good friends, and one person said VCOM reflects what can happen when a person has a vision and the tenacity to make something good happen. And as I read that comment from one of your board members, I remembered the passage in Scripture that you and I know well, and that is, where there is no vision, the people perish. And where there was no vision, nothing would have happened with VCOM. So thank you for being both the visionary and the practical person, too, who made it happen. So we thank you.
It's very satisfying to think that hopefully because of some action that Sue Ellen and I and Dr. Rollins took, that there are 40-some hundred people that'll practice medicine today who otherwise would never have had a chance to do that. So hopefully we have miles to go before we sleep. So hopefully
Yes.
over the next 20 years, we can dramatically increase the production and have the impact on the culture that we really want to have.
Well, thank you again for being our special guest on This Week in Virginia, and we will look forward to coming back again when something else has happened and inform the people of the Commonwealth and others who may see this around the world. Thank you very much.